Hey everyone, it's again Paul and Kyle.
Hello,
We're
hello.
back. We're back with another episode of the Hip Hop Debate. Hoping by now you guys are subscribed. You guys are found your the podcast on any platform that you like, and we're just going to keep bringing episodes each week with new topics and new discussions. And we want to hear from you guys to see what you guys want us to discuss, or what do you want to hear from us. We would love to hear back. So either message us or email us at the hip hop debate at gmail.com, or on YouTube, leave us a comment wherever you want to. We're happy to discuss and tweak anything based off of what our listeners want. So again, I'm Paul and this is Kyle. This is the Hip Hop Debate. And the topic this week is, for episode 3, is which decade/era is the best. We definitely have, I know which decade/era Kyle's going to say, and I'm pretty sure he knows what I'm going to say. And we're going to, talk about it each and then duke it out at the end. So like every episode, we always start with introducing the topic, but then we just briefly like to talk about what's been going on in hip hop the past week since we last discussed. So like I said, the first thing I wanted to mention was Kanye updated Donda. Kanye, we talked about with the Life of Pablo. He never, at least since the Life of Pablo, seems to just never be content with dropping something.
Mm-hmm.
So with Donda, obviously we talked about with the live shows and how he kind of tweaked it between those 3 live shows. He kind of did that again, and we don't know, this might be the final finished product. This might not be, but Keep My Spirit Alive, he took off, I think the person's name was KC. He took them off the chorus and he replaced it with himself. So that song's pretty cool. It made it a little better to me. Nothing crazy. New Again, he updated. I think Chris Brown was on the chorus with him. He took Chris Brown off after he called him a whole ass hoe or whole ass hoe. And he just, I guess, wasn't happy that someone else called him that. So he said, you know what, you're off my album. And then he updated just the bass and some mixes on a few to just sound a little better. So it's nothing too crazy with that. Have you had a chance to listen to the newest version of it?
I have not. No, I didn't even know he updated it. Actually, I just didn't realize that he had updated it.
Yeah, I saw it on Twitter and I was like, huh? And then someone said something about it. Then I looked, like if you search, Kanye West, or you go to Donda, and then there's 2 versions. And I guess either they're going to take the first one off, or I don't know what, but there's 2 versions on there. So being the Kanye stan that I am, I immediately deleted the old one and downloaded the new one. But yeah, so it's still, 24 songs or however long it is. It's most of it's still the same. It's just only those 3 things, well, the 2 songs, and then just the mixing and the bass on a few. Next, I know he's not your favorite rapper, but next, Meek Mill dropped his new album. I know you were definitely, even though most people, I know I was on the side of Drake versus Meek Mill, I was on Drake's side, but I know you were definitely on one side. But I've always liked Meek Mill. I know you're not a fan of his yelling, which we'll just say it is, he's yelling. I've always been a fan of him. I liked his first album, and his second album kind of fell off. That's kind of when, right after he dropped his second album, was when he had the beef with Drake. And then he kind of had a rough few years after that. And he had violated probation. He went to jail. And then he kind of dropped, I like Championships, which was his last album. That was pretty good. And then he has this new one, Expensive Pain. And I don't know, do you have Apple Music?
I do. Yep.
So on Apple Music, like if you go to an album and you see like there's a little synopsis and you hit more, and it usually sometimes gives a whole like story about the album, or the artist tells a story. And I read that Friday, and I was listening to it, a few songs here and there on Friday. Then I was listening straight through and I saw that, and I read it, and he was just trying to really expand his sound during quarantine and during COVID, and trying to, actually add melodies to his music, which Meek Mill and yelling, that's the last thing he was doing was a melody.
Right.
So he added some melodies. Yeah. And he added a little melody to his album. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. He obviously isn't the best. He's not like a, Travis Scott or Kanye or even like a little Dirk in terms of melodies, but
yeah,
it was pretty good. I know you're not his biggest fan, but it's something I would check out if you're slightly interested.
I would be willing to check it out. I would be willing to check it out. I think he's come a long way, and I've come a long way with him. So, I feel like it's worth checking out, especially if there's like nothing else popping up that's, too like big or anything like that. But yeah,
it's a little down period.
Yeah, exactly. When hip hop is like not as big 1 week, I might check it out. Did you happen to check out the Lil Wayne and Rich the Kid album?
So I only listened to I think it might be the first song, some with Tunchi. It has Lil Wayne's name in it, his nickname in it, but I didn't listen to the whole project. Did you?
No, but I was very interested in it, and I definitely want to check it out at some point. It's still kind of like new. I think it came out on Friday, so
Yeah.
so definitely gonna spend some time listening to that too. But yeah, that looks pretty interesting. I haven't really heard too much of Rich the Kid. Like I don't think he's done anything recently, and I never really listened to
Yeah.
a lot of his stuff before. But obviously, Lil Wayne, like I'm gonna be interested at some point. You know.
Yeah, I've only or obviously Lil Wayne we both know, but with Rich the Kid, I've heard only a few songs of his. He has that song Plug Talk, and then he had
Okay.
that song with Kendrick Lamar. Man, I forgot the name of it, but it was a huge song with Kendrick Lamar,
Okay.
and then from like 2017, I think. So
Okay. Yeah.
I've heard some random songs here and there, but I've never listened to a project like you of his.
Yeah.
Uh, just I'd rather listen to other people, but I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
It's Lil Wayne, so I will give it a shot.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You know,
Yeah.
you'll probably know with a Lil Wayne album, you usually know within like the first couple of tracks if it's going to be good or not. You know. So
Yeah, you're like, all right, which Lil Wayne is this?
right. Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly. And
um,
I don't know if you know. Do you listen to Moray at all? He's kind of new.
I
Um,
know of him and I've heard him on songs from other artists,
yeah.
but I've never listened to him.
So he has a really good album that he came out with. I think it was like his own like independent album. So he came out with that like a couple years ago. I want to say it was 2019, but he just released a new song called Bad Situations. It's actually pretty good. I've listened to it once. And it's from a YouTuber that I follow. His name's No Life Shack. I don't know if you've heard of him, but
I think I have.
okay, yeah, he's kind of like a YouTuber. He just kind of like reviews, you know, music or whatever. And so he reviewed that song, and that's how I heard of it. But it's pretty good. He's pretty good for somebody who's, you know, just kind of like up and coming. I know he was on the Double XL freshman list this year. So, but yeah, it's really good. It's called Bad Situations. It's a really good song.
Huh. Is he? It might be someone else. I might really be terrible right now with who this person is. But did he release a joint album with YG, or is that someone else recently?
I think that's somebody else because I think he's only got one album and it's just his.
Okay,
So yeah,
so
so
someone
probably
else.
somebody else. Yeah.
Someone else released recently did it a few maybe a month or two ago with YG had a collab album.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the two more things I wanted to talk about before we get into the topic. One, I know you're not really too familiar with him, but Don Toliver, he's releasing his second album this upcoming Friday, which I am very, very excited for. He's one of my favorite artists right now. He's like a more melodic, even, which would sound kind of crazy, Travis Scott. He's definitely a little more upbeat, I would say, than Travis Scott, in terms of Travis Scott can get some really like slower songs or deep songs where Don Toliver's like more of a light version of him in terms of just the sounds.
Yeah.
And he's also from Houston too, which I like Houston rap. But yeah, and I'm seeing him this upcoming Tuesday, not like in a few days, but the 13th of October. He's coming to Charlotte, so
Okay.
get to see him. I'm excited, and it'll be probably a few songs from his album, so I'll have to really listen to those a lot over that weekend. But yeah, he's coming out with a new album, and I'm pretty excited.
Awesome.
He's, like I said, he's a good artist, and yeah, definitely. If you haven't listened to him, his first album, Heaven or Hell, came out beginning of 2020, I would say, around there. So yeah, I would definitely give him a check him out on that. He has a few songs. He has a song with Migos on there. He's a song with Travis Scott, and he has a song. I think those might be his only two features on the album. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's good.
I think you mentioned it before, and I listened to a little bit of it, just kind of like in the
Oh,
background. I was doing something, and I liked it a lot. And I definitely, after you said his name, I was like, I've definitely heard that name before. And he's on a song that I like a lot. I don't know if they released it on an album or anything, but it's with the Internet Money, and it's called Lemonade.
yeah, Lemonade.
Yeah, I like that song a
Yeah,
lot. So yeah,
yeah, and he has another song with them, with Internet Money, and this one I forgot the name of it. It's him, Gunna, and Lil Uzi Vert. I forgot the name of it. They also
okay,
with Internet Money.
okay,
Yeah, well, I actually want to talk about Internet Money, but we'll save that for another episode. When we talk about next week's topic, we'll talk
yeah,
about Internet Money. So the last thing I wanted to mention before we get into the topic is we keep talking about every week the Wu-Tang show.
hmm
It's getting really good, and we talked about it briefly throughout the week. But man, what they did,
yeah,
what RZA did with putting the beat together, I think was crazy.
yeah. Yep. And that was a really cool episode too, just because like obviously, I mean, depending on what drugs he was taking. I don't know if it actually like unfolded that way, but it was just kind of cool the way like, you know, he like had like the record, and he puts the record on the turntable, and then like he has this vision of like all of the bandmates just like doing their own part, and he's just kind of like, oh, go slower, go faster, you know, do it with more of a kick. Like I thought that was a really cool part. So yeah, it's just another great episode on the show for sure.
Yeah, I thought the fact that like, because obviously, especially back then, like sampling was really, you know, intricate, and then him being able to like take away a bass guitarist or take away, you know, a drummer, or take away and just focus on one thing while he's making the beat, and then adding something else from a different. And it's just cool how like it like he visualized it in his head of how it turned out in real life, and then just how like plugging and then the vocals, having Method Man come in, and who else was it, Jizza, and having certain rappers, Raekwon, like how they fit on the song. And I thought it was just a great episode to show like inside his mind of how it plays out, and how it gets to from just hearing different songs and taking different parts of each song to then being the finished product.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting too. I actually didn't really realize that "Protect Your Neck" was the single, like the first single for that album. And I guess I never realized too that like all of them are on it. And even like during the show, like I was like, no way, there's not every single one of them is on it. Like You God is definitely not on it. Like You God doesn't appear until like the second album, and he has like 4 lines. And I was like, oh, like this is like everybody is literally on this track. And that's why it's like I think I texted you when I saw it, like it's not what like my favorite song on the album. It's actually probably my least favorite song on the album, but like I understand like why they made it the single is because they had everybody on it, and they wanted to like, you know, make everybody aware of like who they were. So yeah, but it was just a great episode. I'm very like hesitant to say this, but like I'm starting to get to the point. I don't know if you're feeling the same way, but like my least favorite character on the show so far has been Ghostface. Like he is just annoying me. Like I just
can understand it.
You know what I mean? Like he just doesn't seem like, out of everybody that's like involved, like he seems like the least involved, you know, and for good reasons. Like I understand like he had a kid, and you know he had this beef with Raekwon, you know, whatever, so it's like hard for him to stay in the same room, but like, you know, he's just like he's not as invested in it as like the other characters are. And again, I don't know if that's how it really happened in real life, but it just seems to me like he's like, so like, yeah, like whatever, this is dumb, whatever. You know, if I have a good verse, I'll put out a good verse, but like I'm not devoted to it like everybody else is. So so I don't know. I just kind of started feeling like I just don't like him a lot. So I don't know how everybody else feels, but
yeah, it's like I understand, because it's like, all right, you know, and it's what's good about it is that it's at least semi, you know, biographical in terms of it shows that like he was struggling to put his all into it and to get into it because of he had a kid, and he had, you know, his girlfriend, or I don't know what they were at the time, but they, you know, he's trying to figure everything out and trying to support his kid, but he couldn't, you know, solely focus on that at the time. And I understand it does get a little it's like, all right, we get it. I can get a little like his character, not him as a person and everything, but his character in the show seems like, all right, you know, you're Ghostface Killer, just do it already. You're Ghostface Killer, like you got it.
And it's so interesting to me too, because like if you really think about it, and you know, you could get into a debate about it, but he was probably like the second best in the group, you know. So it's like he's probably, him and Raekwon were probably like the 2 like most popular out of the group. And it's just crazy to think like, you know, if he actually like had put in more at like all of his effort, like how much better would he be? Because he's already really good, you know. So like imagine if he was like giving it his all, and he didn't have any distractions, and he didn't have to worry about, you know, the beef that he had with other guys in the group. Like, you know, he would probably be even better. So so it's just crazy to think about, you know.
All right, so one last thing about that before we get onto the topic is did you see that he's dropping a new album soon?
Ghostface?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
And you know the executive producer is well, you wouldn't know if you didn't know. No, Kanye.
Oh, okay.
The executive producing the whole album. So hopefully it's not it's a more of a Daytona in terms of it being good instead of a Nasir. I like Nasir, but most people don't. But hopefully it's more a Daytona path than it is a Nasir path.
Wow, that would be really cool. I would definitely be interested in that for sure.
I mean, I think Kanye and Mike Dean are the 2 executive producers.
Okay,
so
cool.
Should be interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, but before we get on to the topic though, we also have to talk about, did you see the Super Bowl halftime?
Oh my God, how did we not mention that?
We have to talk about that because that's crazy. So the Super Bowl halftime, it's going to be Mary J. Blige, Eminem, Kendrick Lamar, and Snoop Dogg, right? And I
And
believe
Dr.
anybody
Dre.
else? Dr. Dre. Yeah. So like that's going to be insane.
Wild.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited because I'm not sure exactly what to expect from it. Like, are they
Yeah.
all going to come out together and just like do like one big thing, or are they going to be like, is there like a headliner and like all of them are just kind of like guests? Like, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but
So what I've gathered, and just from looking at my intense research, looking at the poster, is that it's Dr. Dre is like, I think, the guy, and
okay.
then he's bringing out, I don't know about Mary J. Blige essentially, but like he's gonna have like he's gonna start off like, and then bring out Snoop and bring out Eminem, and because he's had influence in all their careers.
Yeah.
And then I think I don't know, he might have had some influence with Mary J. Blige. I don't think so,
Mhm.
but I think she might maybe start it off or end it. Probably start it
Yeah.
off, and then he's gonna come out and then do like Snoop, and then do that, then like Eminem, and then now Kendrick, kind of
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
three different eras.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. But any way we get it, I'm happy. This is like, for especially like people like us who like love hip hop, like seeing
Yeah.
this, because you get it here and there. They'll sprinkle in, like they had Travis Scott do like a song or two a few years ago. They'll
Right.
sprinkle in like Big Boy, I think was that same year. So
Yep.
they'll sprinkle in here and there, but they don't like, this is a hip hop and a little R&B headliner, which this is, I don't know if we've ever seen that before at the Super
Yeah.
Bowl.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting because like I feel like they always with the Super Bowl they always try and get a halftime show that like applies to like everybody,
Yeah,
So like Bruno Mars, for example, Justin like all
Beyonce.
those guys. Yeah, like an artist that can like kind of like put on a good show for anybody, whether you're a young kid or you're a younger adult or you're an older adult. Like they try to like meet everybody's expectations and wants kind of, but this one like somewhere my dad is like cursing like what
Yeah,
is like why are we
my
doing
dad
that?
too.
Yeah, and like I'm like for me I'm just like I'm excited because we kind of grew up on all those people really.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I'm excited. I'm really excited to see like how it's gonna unfold and stuff,
yeah,
and yeah, it should be a good show if they do it right. So
yeah. And I don't see Dr. Dre, I don't see any of them really putting on a bad show, which is good. It's not like they've had a iffy track record. I think they're all like somewhat a perfectionist in their own way, especially like Kendrick and Dre and Eminem. Those
yeah,
three are like, they're very meticulous. So
yeah,
yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that just slipped my mind. That was a huge story. When I saw that this week, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be, for me, I was like, oh my God, this is like
yeah.
as good as it can get. And they're doing it in LA, which kind of makes sense, even though Eminem's not, but the rest, and well, Mary J. Blige isn't either, but Dr. Dre, Snoop, and Kendrick are all from California.
Yeah, yep. It's kind of perfect. So
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to get into the topic of this episode. So the topic of this episode is which era/decade is the best. And like I said earlier to start the show, we both are definitely having two different eras and decades. If we did have that wouldn't be a good discussion. So thank God we had two different eras. So I went first last time. So this time we'll let Kyle go first. So the floor is yours, buddy.
all right, yeah. So for me, I would have to say that the best era in hip hop has to be the 90s. I think that the 1990s are just kind of like the golden era of the hip hop community. And I'm going to start just by going with some like iconic albums that just came out from the 90s.
I'm doing the same exact thing with mine. That's the first thing I started out with on my list.
Yeah. No, I mean, but that's like a really good like way to like solidify like an era.
Yeah.
It's just like all the great albums that came out during those 10 years. And so for me to just name a few, you have The Chronic, Dr. Dre, Lauryn Hill's solo album. She was also part of the Fugees, who we kind of talked about last week, and they had the album The Score. You have Biggie's 2 albums that kind of came out before he passed away. Life After Death really came out like after he died, but it was pretty much recorded when he was still alive. Outkast, you had Aquemini, you also had AT Aliens, I think came out in the 90s as well. And then, Snoop, Doggy Style, Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, and Volume 2. Of course, what I think is the greatest rap album of all time, Nas with Illmatic. And he had some other ones too. They weren't nearly as big as Illmatic was, but that was probably one of the biggest. Again, you can make the argument for the greatest rap album of all time. Wu-Tang, Enter the 36 Chambers. Eminem, Slim Shady LP, kind of like on the back end of the 90s. I think that came out in like 1999.
Yeah.
you know, A Tribe Called Quest, Low End Theory, like all these great albums. Tupac, All Eyes on Me, Raekwon, Only Built for Cuban Links. The list just keeps going on and on. I'm not going to bore people too much, but there's just, you know, there's so many great albums, and all those, like, I would say, like, are classics, right? Like those are all like classic albums. Like those are albums that are going to be good for as long as we continue to listen to hip hop.
Yeah.
So those are just, you know, those are just a few albums. I also think it's really important to note too that like there were a lot of 80s artists that were still kind of like making waves in the 90s as well. You know, you have like the Beastie Boys who, you know, they started in the 80s, but they were still like relevant. LL Cool J probably dropped like his biggest album in the 90s, even though he started in the 80s with Mama Said Knock You Out. You know, you still had like the classic, you know, Eric B and Rakim and Public Enemy. Slick Rick was still around. Can't forget DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Like they were, you know, they started in the 80s and they came into the 90s as well. You know, Ice-T, NWA, not so much. I think they had like one, they only dropped 2 albums, and the second one was in 91. But then you also have like, you know, all the solo acts of Ice Cube and Dre, and Eazy-E even had a couple albums before he died. So like, you know, you had like 80s artists that were kind of still making their sound in the 90s as well.
Yeah.
We also talked a lot about, you know, last week about like women in hip hop. And I think that the 90s was like a great kind of era for that to kind of get started. You know, you talked a lot about Lil' Kim, which, you know, she was like a big person, like big, you know, person in terms of like, you know, advocating for female rappers to be a part of that community. And I said Lauryn Hill, and it's the same thing for her. You know, she was, you know, a big part of that as well. But if you also think about like women, not maybe just not rappers, but were still like kind of like influential to the hip hop community, or like played a big role. But like I'm talking about people like Mary J. Blige, who we just kind of talked about. Janet Jackson, she was still kind of big. Erykah Badu, Missy Elliott, Aaliyah, Faith Evans, and even again some of the women that were in the 80s like Salt and Peppa and Queen Latifah, they were still relevant in the 90s as well. So I feel like with the 90s too, you also saw like a kind of like a surge of just like women in hip hop, R&B, and kind of playing a role in that. You know, you also have like groups and duos. So like a lot of great groups and duos that came out of the 90s, like Wu-Tang, Outkast, Tribe Called Quest, Cypress Hill, De La Soul. Even some people forget like Junior Mafia, which was a group with Lil' Kim and Biggie and all those guys. You know, they didn't have like a very long career together, but they were still like, you know, some of the best to ever do it, kind of forming together. You know, and then I didn't think about this one. I completely blanked on it until we talked about him last week, but the Hot Boys with Lil Wayne and Juvenile, like that was also like, that's, you know, that
I think BG, right?
Yeah. And so like that group kind of like started off, I mean, Juvenile had a great album in the 90s as well, 400 Degrees. That kind of was like almost like the staple for Southern rap at the time, you know? So you had them, and then you also had 3 6 Mafia, which a lot of people sometimes kind of put to the side as well. But just, you know, some really great groups that came out of the 90s as well. And then, you know, to list some other like producers, you know, Q-Tip was big, making a lot of beats. We really saw like in the 90s, a lot of like producers, like, you know, doing a lot of work for like a bunch of different artists. They didn't always just stay with like, they weren't like an Eric B and Rakim, where it was like you had Eric B making the beat and Rakim was the rapper, and they were kind of a duo. You started to kind of see producers like explore to all different artists and make beats for other people. So like, again, Q-Tip, Eric Sermon, Dre, we talked about. Jay Dilla is, you know, a really like, you know, famous rapper that came out of or a producer that came out of the 90s. And I love I don't know if you've ever heard Donuts. Have you ever heard his album Donuts?
No.
It's really good. And it's, you know, it's a lot of just his production. It's not so much like rapping on it. It's more just like Jay Dilla kind of doing his thing. And that, I don't know if that came out in the 90s, but like, you know, he was, you know, from the 90s and played a big part in hip hop as well. You know, you have the RZA, Pimp C, even Timbaland. Like Timbaland had a very big start in the 90s. Like he was very, you know, he started a lot of people's careers, particularly Aaliyah. I think she's probably the biggest one.
And Missy.
And Missy Elliott, yeah. But he was doing so much work for a lot of different people to start his career. So
Genuine.
Yeah,
Pony.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you know, and then he even started doing his own thing too, which is also, you could kind of relate that back to Q-Tip as well. Like those guys were like, they made good beats, but they were also like pretty good rappers as well. You know, Timbaland maybe not so much, but Q-Tip definitely when he was with, you know, Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, a lot of the like the producers that we see now who can make beats but can also rap, like Kanye, they had a really big kind of like influencer from Q-Tip and Timbaland's and people like that.
Pharrell,
Pharrell, yep,
influence
exactly.
from them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just feel like there's a lot. Another thing that I really didn't think about too either until I kind of started like processing like all the music that came out in the 90s was the 90s was also a really big time for like rap rock. So like if you think about like Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? Like they have a very kind of like rap influenced style of rock music. And that's not something that, you know, just kind of like came out of nowhere. It kind of just kind of like formed itself. And I think that that was really heavily influenced in the rap music that was coming out in the 90s. And that kind of influenced people like Red Hot Chili Peppers, like two of their albums in the 90s were like some of their biggest. Blood Sugar Sex Magic was one of them, and then Californication's another one. And they definitely have some like rap influence in there as well. Beck also has some rap influence. Rage Against the Machine, like all three of their four albums came out in the 90s. You know, Kid Rock, some people might think like Kid Rock's a joke, but like, you know, for a while there, like a lot of people were digging his stuff because he was kind of combining rap and country and rock together, which was like a sound that nobody had ever heard before.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have bands like Limp Bizkit, Korn, Insane
Keep
Clown
rolling,
Posse.
rolling.
Yeah, Get Rolling, exactly, right? So it's like, you know, all of these, like they may not have been that good at the time, but like it was a new style of rock and rap, and even probably rock fans probably like it more than like rap fans do. But it was just another type of way to like incorporate both sounds together. And if you even think about some of the people now, like today, that still kind of use that same kind of style, like Linkin Park. I talked about them, I think in our first episode, because that was really like the start for me.
Yeah.
But if you think about even like Lil Nas X or Post Malone, even XXX, who I'm going to talk about later, like they all incorporate some kind of like rock, punk rock, you know, influence in their music. And I feel like that was kind of like inspired by some of those bands in the 90s that kind of used rap and hip hop together. So I think about that. The last couple points I just want to make briefly. I also, because we kind of talked about it last episode too, but like that was when you really started seeing like hip hop as a business kind of like surge, you know. So you know you had Jay-Z, and even though Rockefeller was kind of more like a little bit later, he was still kind of starting to build that up. And all of like the three albums that he released in the 90s were under Rockefeller. So which, I mean, those albums were pretty great.
Yeah.
You know, and then you had, you know, Puff with Bad Boy, and, you know, just some of the albums that he dropped with, you know, with Biggie and all that. And then you had Dr. Dre and Aftermath with The Firm and Slim Shady LP. And then he dropped his own album 2001. So like, you know, he was a big part of that. And then Suge Knight with Death Row, you know, with The Chronic and Doggy Style and Dogfather. You know, those were great albums, along with Tupac's All Eyes on Me, which were great. But then also I feel like a lot of people don't give this guy credit, and I kind of understand why. But when you look at it, when it's all said and done, like he was pretty successful, was Master P. Like
Yeah.
Master P, you know, like he didn't have like the big like rappers like, you know, Dre had or Suge or Puff, but like he still was able to make like a pretty big empire. You know, with like his, you know, entrepreneur skills and stuff like that. So shout out to him, because he, you know, he was able to put stuff together that, you
Shout
know,
out to
maybe
Master P. We know you're
yeah.
listening.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to Master P. But yeah, he was just able to put together a pretty good empire when, you know, he may not have had like everything that, you know, some of the other guys had. And so last but not least, the last point I want to make on why I think the 90s is probably the best era of hip hop was some of the rap beefs that came out of that era were just kind of cool. You had the first one that I want to talk about is Ice Cube and NWA. I think that, you know, the No Vaseline song, where, you know, he's basically telling Dre to like stick to producing, and he tells Eazy-E to, you know, he tells Eazy-E that he's a man and nobody's humping him and stuff like that. Like it was kind of crazy because, you know, we thought that NWA probably was going to go a lot longer than it did. And it kind of got cut short, and, you know, there was definitely some tension between those guys, and it was just kind of fun to like kind of hear like what Ice Cube's perspective was on all that. So which I think you're going to find in any group, right? Like hasn't really been a hip hop group where we're like, oh, like they've been solid for the whole time that they've been together.
Yeah, the only one you could possibly say, but they're still relatively young, is Migos. but that's the only
Yeah.
one, and that's because they're actually family, so that's a little different.
Yeah.
They're all
Like,
related.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So they're not just like friends that got together, like they have to
Yeah.
like each other, you know? So yeah.
Holidays will be awkward if they broke up.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't have no Thanksgiving dinner if you guys break up. So yeah, but I thought that was pretty interesting. But then of course, like probably the biggest, you can argue the two, which one was bigger than the other. But for me personally, I just think that the biggest rap beef of all time has to be the Biggie and Tupac one.
Yeah.
Because they started out as friends, and then it was kind of coincidental that Biggie releases "Who Shot You" right after Tupac gets shot. So it's like, but then you're like, oh no, it really wasn't about you. And it's like, well, that's you probably shouldn't have released that song if that was the case. But then Tupac comes back with "Hit 'Em Up" and basically just like opening line, like, "That's why I fucked your bitch, you fat mother," like just going crazy. And just like, again, not holding back, kind of like what I said about Nas with the whole Ether and Takeover thing. Like Nas just came out and said like, fuck Jay-Z, right? And Tupac kind of did the same thing. Like you knew who he was talking about. Like there was no way to cut around it. So that happens, and that beef, like, while it probably didn't really last long, or like not a lot was said between the two, you have to understand that like it's really started the whole East Coast West Coast thing, right? Like people on the East Coast were like, oh, take a look at what they're doing over there in California, and they wanted to make it competitive, but like it wasn't until Biggie and Tupac started feuding where it really got like serious. Like people were like really dropping some serious stuff, like there was threats and all that other kind of shit. And then eventually it obviously results in both of them dying. Pac gets shot in Vegas, and then Biggie gets killed 6 months later. So it really took like the whole hip hop community like up to another level,
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy that both murders still remain unsolved, and it's probably going to go down as one of the biggest controversies and conspiracies like in all of pop culture, not just in music, but like in pop culture.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it also kind of started more East Coast, West Coast feuds. The one that I'm thinking about in particular is when Snoop and Tupac also had a beef with Mobb Deep. And they were kind of feuding, so it just kind of started like this whole big rivalry between the East and the West Coast. So I know I said a lot there, but like when it's all said and done, like all those things I feel like contribute a lot to the 90s and why it was the best. And I'm just going to run off some more names, because if that all I said wasn't enough, you still had people like Big L, Big Pun, Busta Rhymes, Dipset, DMX, E40, Goody Mob, Ja Rule, Juvenile, Redman, Scarface, Twista, and UGK. Like those are all people that you can dive even more into, but we don't have that time. But like I said, there's just so many people, so many influences, so many different sounds that came out of the 90s that kind of made it, for me, the golden era of hip hop. So that's kind of why I chose it. And now I'm going to let you kind of defend your era of hip hop and what you think is the best. So take it away.
All right, that was some good talking points, and I agree with a lot of it. It's number two to me, but to me, the 2010s were the best decade or era ever in hip hop. So from 2010 to 2019, I think hip hop has evolved and became was the best it ever was. So I'm just gonna list off kind of like what you did with the best albums.
Okay.
Have to start off with "To Pimp a Butterfly."
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna read them off, but just that album alone.
Right.
And then the first two, honestly, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Yeah.
2010 it was released, so that's part of the decade.
They
Good
don't
Kid,
need
Mad
any
City.
explanation.
All right, cool. Good Kid, Mad City. Nothing Was the Same.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. Life of Pablo. Take Care. KOD. Watch the Throne. Daytona. 2014 Forest Hills Drive. Dirty Sprite 2. Rodeo. And 444. And I could have went more, but I was like, these are, to me, some of the biggest albums of the decade.
Yeah.
So the reason why I think it's the best decade ever is the growth in the genre as a whole. There were never, like in the 90s, there was not as many subgenres as there is, or if any, as there is now. There's like with any genre of music, there's like rock. It started off with, I'm gonna go into that, but then it just grew, and then there's so many different subgenres. So that's what's happening. That's what happened and is happening in hip hop. Like I said, with rock. So like Elvis, the Beatles, Metallica, and Nirvana are all from the same umbrella, essentially, but they're obviously all in their own lane. Elvis is rock and roll. Beatles is, I guess, also kind of rock and roll, but a little different. Metallica's, what is that, rock, just actually rock. And
Heavy
then
metal, yeah.
heavy metal, you would say, and then Nirvana's there's, what do they consider essentially?
So they're kind of considered grunge, which is kind of
Grunge.
like the start of like alternative rock, you know?
Yeah. So, but they're all under the same umbrella essentially. So
Right.
when people say, "Oh, rappers today now suck," well, it's not the same because it's not. It's a different style and different time and different subgenre.
Right.
Um, so that's what's happening now in hip hop. If you say, Kendrick, Juice World, Post Malone, and Migos, they're all different sounding artists. All four of them sound different, but they're all considered hip hop artists, or at least Post Malone is on the fence, but the others are definitely considered hip hop artists. So they're all under the umbrella, but they're all in their own lane. So I'm going to go into the subgenre. So then we have like, I'll start with pop because that's every genre of music has a pop subgenre. So you have artists like Drake, now Lil Baby, I would say is kind of popish. Nicki Minaj, Post Malone, I'd say Meek Mill even, and like Big Sean. I would say those are like some pop names you would have in hip hop, like the big ones. Obviously, there's others. Then you have trap. You have guys like Future, Young Thug, Migos, 21 Savage, and then earlier 2010s you have like Rick Ross was like the big trap guy at the time.
Yeah.
And then you have emo rap because like there's that, especially in the past 5 years or so, emo rap has kind of taken off with acts like Juice World, Lil Peep, rest in peace to both of them, Trippie Redd, XXX Tentacion. They're kind of in that, and also RIP to him. They're all in like the emo lane. And then you have like sing rap, like guys who are very heavy on the melodies, like a Travis Scott or a Lil Durk, even more recent Lil Durk, not like when he first came out. Even a guy like turned into that is like Wiz Khalifa. I know he's not as big as he was now, but as he was back then, but like he kind of really adopted that singing style of his rap. Gunna does a lot of flows and melodies. Polo G is a lot of into melodies, and also Tory Lanez. Tory Lanez is really, he's a guy, and like similar to Drake, but Drake's just such a big star. But similar, they can go from singing to rapping, kind of, or in the same even verse. And then you have conscious rappers like Kendrick, Cole, Big Crit, even, and like a Joey Badass. They're more like conscious in a way. And then you have drill like Chief Keef, Pop Smoke, rest in peace, Lil Reese, King Louis. These are guys that are just, Chicago and now Pop Smoke and some of these newer artists in New York, drill music. But these are all technically hip hop, but they're all different sounding artists. They're all in their own lanes. And then another reason why I think this is the best is there's four goats from this generation to me. Four people that should be, at least for three, I think should be in everyone's top 10. And then for, if you're separating the women, I think at least one should be in your top three. You have Kendrick, Drake, and Cole. I think they're all in my top 10. All in, two of them are in my top 5, or yeah. And then Nicki is me number 2 for women behind not Erica Badu, sorry, Lauryn Hill. So these are four goats, four people that you can arguably, at least for the guys, I personally think none of them are my goat, but you can make a case for any three of those to say that they're the greatest of all time to me. I don't think that, but I can understand someone making that point.
Yeah.
So next, hip hop nowadays, and I will talk more about that, is nationwide and global. Hip hop is obviously, like I said, it's so big, but in the 90s, it obviously is built off the foundation of the 90s, but it has been elevated and taken to another level. So also in the 90s, in terms of nationwide, it was really, there was like 3 or 4 hubs. It was New York, LA, and the Bay. So let's count that as one. Atlanta kind of wasn't even respected really. Outkast kind of had to put them on the map. And then Houston also kind of had to get respected too with UGK and DJ Screw and stuff like that. But then now there's hubs all over the country, and not even just artists coming from different areas, but like actually like there's a bunch of artists coming from these areas, like Chicago has a big scene. Obviously it was there, but not what it is now. Detroit's such a big scene now too. Memphis is blowing up right now. With guys like Moneybagg Yo and Pooh Shiesty and Yo Gotti. Memphis is a big scene. Miami's been around for a while, but back with what's his name? Old school Miami. Pop that, don't stop. What's his name? Whatever, him. But Miami really took off. Miami's a huge scene. Philly's a huge scene too. You have guys like Meek Mill and Lil Uzi Vert and other guys, Vori coming out of Philly. So there's a lot of different areas where rappers are coming from nowadays, instead of kind of the traditional. You kind of had to be in those certain areas back in the 90s.
Even like Portland, Oregon.
Portland.
like Amine comes from Portland, or like I had no idea that he was from Portland. I was like, oh, that's an interesting spot to have a rapper come from. so
Yeah,
so yeah, there's tons of places now.
definitely. And that kind of goes more with the Mine in Portland, kind of what I'm about to say next in terms of you're having rappers come from like random areas like Portland. You'll never really
Mhm.
seen that. Jack Harlow's from Louisville, Kentucky. Never really
Yeah.
seen that. Trippie Redd's from Columbus, Ohio. Who the fuck's coming from Columbus, Ohio? J. Cole in Fayetteville. You know, you could say
Yeah.
even like, and DaBaby in Charlotte. Like he's the
Hmm.
first real big rapper from Charlotte.
Right.
Pittsburgh had Wiz Khalifa and Mac Miller. Like no one was
Hmm.
from Pittsburgh before them. So
Yeah.
it's cool that like you don't have to be from these certain areas as long as, especially nowadays with everything on the internet and electronic, you just need a mic and you know, and then you could
Mhm.
find any beat online and try to rap over it. So it's creating you know, rappers from all different areas, which is cool. So that's nationwide. Then I'm gonna talk about global. And I really only talked about two, but it's only one I really need to talk about. Toronto. Toronto is
Mhm.
really just you know, they're blown up. And
Mhm.
you might even know more, but I only came up with uh five people. Drake, obviously,
Mhm.
Tory Lanez is a very big artist from
Mhm.
Toronto, and he's not a rapper, but I mentioned The Weeknd in there just because he does a lot of collabs with, you know,
Yeah.
rappers, and he's featured on a lot of rap songs, or he has rappers on his songs.
Yep.
Nav's a pretty well-known artist from, and Party Next Door too. Party
Right.
Next Door also. I don't know if you think of anyone else from Toronto, but those five alone, those are big artists.
Yeah.
And that's just Toronto. Toronto's blown up. Toronto's one of the hottest, you know, hubs of hip hop right now. And then also
Right.
England, like, or you know, the Great Britain or whatever, London, you could whatever, you know, Giggs is a big artist, Stormzy's a big artist, and Skepta. And there's
Mhm.
probably others. There's definitely others. Those are the three I know of, and the three
Yeah.
that I've listened to Skepta and Stormzy, both like they're projects of theirs, and they're good. But and then there's, you know, from all over the world, there's hip hop artists, or hip hop has their own lane or their own, you know, hub in these countries that, you know, whether it's like Nigeria or was it France, or they're all over the world, that hip hop is just global now. And it's obviously it was built on the 90s, but it blew up and is now global.
Yeah.
And like I said, hip hop is the biggest genre in the world right now. It's the number one music genre in the world. And
Mhm.
like I said, it was obviously built off the foundation of the 90s, but the 2010s elevated it to another level. And then one last thing I wanted to talk about before we, you know, discuss is nowadays I feel like you're more focused on the subgenre rather than where the person is from. Like I said, like back in the days, oh, this person's from New York, oh, they're from LA, they're from Atlanta. Nowadays you're like, you look into that and you'll recognize that, but that's not where, you know, primarily where you're looking. You're like, oh man, this person's from Atlanta, I have to listen to them. This person's from New York, I have to listen to them. Back in the days, like someone like my brother who grew up on 90s hip hop, he was, you know, focused not entirely, but partially of where they were from. Where, you know, oh, this guy's from New York, I have to give him a listen. This guy's from here, I have to give him a listen. And someone like me who kind of grew up, I know I listened to 90s music, and I grew up in the 2000s and 2010s was where I really like, you know, is where bulk of my music I like is from. I don't
Mhm.
care where the person's from. I don't care. They could be from, you know, Brooklyn, or they could be from bumfuck North Carolina. Like I don't give a shit. As long as if I like your music and I like the style of your music, I'm gonna
Right.
give you a listen. And you're focused on the actual style of music. So if you're listening to, you know, if you're listening for emo type of rap, you might listen to Juice World. If you listen to trap, you might listen to Future. Or you listen to drill, you want to listen to Pop Smoke. Like
Mhm.
it's all about the type of music you want to listen to, and uh listening to artists in that type of music, not necessarily where that artist is from.
Right.
So that is why I think the 2010s is the best genre or best era or not genre, sorry, best era or decade of hip hop in history. Do you have any rebuttals? I know you probably don't, because every point I made was spot on, but if you have any, if you could think of any, I would love to hear them.
I do. I didn't really think about your point of like where like hip hop is like so global now. Like you can pretty much like go anywhere, and like there's a rapper from this town and a rapper from here and a rapper from there. I like that a lot, because in my era that I chose, it was basically just like kind of like you said, like there was New York and you had the LA Bay Area, and like yeah, they had like Atlanta was on the come up.
Yeah.
And you know, you had Houston, kind of like what you said, but they weren't like nearly as popular as some of the Houston rappers that are now.
Yeah.
They did have like their start, and like, you know, if you kind of like research a little bit, you're like, oh yeah, like I know this one song from that Houston rapper that, you know, I never heard of before. So they were kind of like just starting. And also like you also had Chicago, like Common was big in, you know, the 90s as well, but like that was pretty much it. Like everybody was focused on New York versus LA because that's how big that rivalry was. So like I think you made a good point about like how, you know, in like the 2010s you started seeing more people come from like Portland and you know, Charlotte and just like all over the place. So so I thought that was a good point. I personally feel like though, like a lot of the people that are in the 2010s, like I went like if I were to compare them with like a person from the 90s, like I probably would most likely always pick the person from the 90s just because of the style and just because of like when I think of like comparing artists, I think like who can go toe to toe with who. Like I don't think like I would pick like a J. Cole or a Travis Scott to go toe to toe with like you know, a Nas or an Eminem or even maybe Snoop Dogg. Like Snoop Dogg in the beginning was like really good. Or like, you know, Raekwon, like Raekwon could kill anybody. You know, so I think when I hear about like the people that particularly do like the emo rap kind of stuff, like I personally, like I'm not big into like Juice World and like all those guys. Like I just think that, and like Trippie Red to me is god awful. Like I can't stand Trippie Red.
I'm not really that big into him.
You know, and like again, like I can understand, like I can appreciate like the fact that, you know, there's different types of rap now, whether it's, you know, different rap from like different parts of the country or just different styles of rap. But I feel like the 90s was kind of like that was like the golden era for people to like battle each other and kind of compete more. Like I don't think there's a lot of competition these days in hip hop. I mean, not as much as there was in the 90s. Like there's still competition obviously, but
Yeah.
the 90s, like every artist had somebody that they were competing against, you know. And even like the people that I mentioned who like did more as like a business, like, you know, Puff and Suge Knight, they were still going at it with each other, and they both of them didn't even really rap, you know. So
Yeah.
like in the 90s, like it was more of just like a cutthroat, like in your face, like this is what hip hop is all about, and I'm going to come at you with everything I got. And I think that's what made it so appealing. And so that's why I would just say like a lot of the people, like even some of the people that I didn't mention, like I don't listen to a lot of Big Pun, but I would put him over some of the other people that kind of are new to like rap today. So I don't know, that's just kind of how I'm feeling, just kind of what I think. I just feel like a lot of the people in the 90s, like a lot of people today couldn't go toe to toe with them. So that's
Yeah.
kind of like my rebuttal, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree where you're coming from. And like with Kendrick said on Control, like he's trying to outdo all of these guys in his class. And I
Right.
totally agree that competition brings the best out of people.
Yeah.
And I wish there was a little more competition nowadays, and as like there used to be. The only thing is like, which I think that's everyone is kind of taking a different look at it, is like we're all winning now. We're trying to get as many, and I don't know how true this is. And I know like a guy like Jay-Z or someone else like in his stratosphere feels like, you know, we get as many, you know, wealthy black men as possible, or as many wealthy people as possible. That's their goal now. And I totally understand that, the monetary side. I wish the music side was still a little more competitive, and like you said, I'm trying to outdo you. Like, you know,
Right.
you'll see that here and there, like even though no one said anything straight up, like Kanye and Drake were kind of competing. Or, you know, like I think maybe on the first episode, you know, I talked about Kanye and 50 Cent trying to like outsell each other, or you're trying to, you know, outdo each other. But there's only those handful of artists that are really trying to be cutthroat. And those are the
Yeah.
guys that really are like, and Drake's out of that now because he's just so big. But like
Yeah.
these guys, like more of like Kanye, the conscious rap, which is more traditionally 90s style, like a Kendrick or J. Cole or a Joey Badass. They're trying to like outdo everyone in their lane, which,
Right.
you know, you have to respect that. But then you'll have guys like, you know, you have guys like the Juice World or like Amigos that are not really trying to they're in their own lane, and they're just doing what they can as best
Yeah.
they trying to, you know, they might not be competing as much with like another trap artist, but they're just trying to, I guess, make us the quality music without, you know, feeling as much pressure as trying to beat Future or 21 Savage or whoever is,
Yeah.
you know, hot in trap. So I get what you're
Right.
saying. I agree. I think they just have a different outlook now, and
Yeah.
it's good in a way. As I said, it's also could be bad in a way, and more in your point that, you know, you're not getting that competitive, like, because and everyone knows competition brings the best out of everyone, whether it's
Right.
music, whether it's sport, whether it's anything else. Like if you're competing, you're going to try your hardest to beat that other person. So like,
Right.
like people say, like kind of relative to like 90s basketball and today basketball. I'm not going to dive too much in that. I think today's basketball is better than the 90s because you have to be good at everything now. But anyway, like, and people like joining teams, super teams, it's like, that's whatever, but like they're trying to win at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. And I guess kind of going back to like the hip hop thing is like, it all depends on kind of like what you're into. I guess like that's gonna like kind of put your input a little bit, it's gonna make your input different than some other people, because like for me, like, when hip hop first started out, like that's how it was. It was like, I'm gonna listen to what you do, and then I'm gonna do it better, and I'm gonna come at you for it. And I think a lot of people like that because like, like for me, like, one of my favorite artists is Drake. And like, I was so like hopeful that he was gonna respond to Pusha T with the story of Adidon. Like I wanted him to come back. And he even says like, like, oh, I had this track, but I said some really terrible things and blah, blah. And it's like, who knows if that's true or not? But like, if that was true, like, I want to hear that. Like, I want to hear that song because like, that's what I like. I like listening to rap when it's like, a competitive sport, or like, like you're gonna diss somebody so bad that like, it's just like, it hurts them, like that's the kind of hip hop that I like. But I also can understand why people today are more like, I don't need to be successful in hip hop just by battling you and like telling everybody that I'm better than you. Like there are some people that are just like, all right, I'm going to get successful by taking rap music, which I love, but like I also like to listen to rock every now and then, or I like to listen to pop and kind of blend those sounds together, and I'll get big that way. So I feel like nowadays rap is good now because like people are coming up with more and more ideas. Whereas the one gripe that I would say against my argument for the 90s is that like, again, in the 90s, it was like pretty much the same kind of production beats. Again, you had your people like the RZA and Q-Tip who kind of changed it up a little bit, but for the most part, it was just like lay down a simple beat and I'm gonna make this song big with my words. I'm gonna kill you with my words. But now it's more like, I'm just gonna take hip hop and I'm gonna put my own little twist to it, and that's how I'm gonna get big. So I feel like that kind of plays, kind of like people today don't have to be so like competitive with each other because they're going to get big if they have a unique sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like as long as you have a unique sound today, that's going to make you famous. Whereas like in the 90s, it was more like whoever has the better bars against each other is going to be the one that's more famous,
Definitely.
So
I agree. Yeah. It was definitely more like, because that's how it originated, like battling each other. It started, even like in the Wu-Tang show, like Riz is like they're all trying to outdo each other on a track.
Right.
Nowadays, no one's really trying to obviously everyone wants to hear that they have the best verse and they want to, but they're not trying to like be as cutthroat as you were saying in that right. respect.
Yeah.
So I think we can both agree that I'm right. No, okay. At least what you said a lot of good points, and I definitely things that I didn't think of and things that I swaying my opinion. I'm still obviously believing, that the 2010s is the best, but you made some very good points, and have to commend you for that because you got me thinking.
Thank you, sir. Ditto to you as well. I personally thought that you were going to say the 2000s. I didn't think you were going to say 2010s.
I think the 2000s is like it went 90s and then it went 2000s and then it went
came back up a little bit.
It's going up, yeah. Because the 2000s, it was especially like the early, like the 2003,
like the bling rap era, yeah.
2004 to like 2008 or 9 was just god awful. It was everything was a dance, and even though there's a lot of dances now, but that's like it was not good. Yeah. So all right, awesome. So everyone, let us know. Sound off in the comments. Tweet at us. On our Instagram post, give us a comment. Let us know what you think, who you side with, or if you think the 80s or the 2000s were a better era. Let us know. And let us know what you think. Yeah, we'll love to hear back from you guys. So we have a few things for end of show to wrap it up. I'll start off with Kyle. So your album was ? By XXXTentacion. You have the floor.
All right. Yeah. First of all, I never took XXXTentacion seriously, like at all. I don't think I ever listened to a single song from him before this album, except for I did listen to his XXL Cypher which was deep and dark. And so I was kind of like expecting that from him, and I feel like I got that on this album. But I just kind of like wrote down some notes for like a lot of the tracks, but I thought it started off like actually pretty well. I like the song a lot called Alone Part 3. I think that that's a great song. And the thing that I immediately picked up on with that song and kind of carried out through the rest of the album was his use of acoustic guitar, which I was really into that. Like I thought that he used it pretty well. Not every track sounds great. Like I think there's a couple tracks where like the guitar is just kind of like repetitive and just kind of does like the same like kind of riff over and over again. But again, kind of like what we were talking about recently is like, he has kind of like his own sound when it comes to instrumentation that I just kind of like. And like I said, I kind of picked that up from the it's not the very first track, but it's like the first like song, which was Alone Part 3. I thought that was a great song. My favorite song, I think, is actually the next one after that, Moonlight. I think that
Oh my God, I love that song.
Yeah, it's so good. I love kind of like the choppy reversible production that he does. And just kind of like he has like a really hard kick drum, and his flow is pretty good. Like his singing flow is great on both of those tracks. And then I think another one of my favorites actually is even the next song after that, called Sad. I think that that's a great, like he has a great refrain on that. And I actually really like his singing. I think a lot of times in this album there are parts where like I wish he did a little bit more like just like clear open singing rather than like kind of like mumbling, like mumble rap a little bit. But this is one of the songs where like I feel like he does like a great job like actually like presenting his singing voice, and it has great production as well. And I feel like on that song particularly, his singing and the production kind of complement each other really well. So yeah, and then like that one has a really like dark messages and kind of a lot of stuff in there, which I got a lot from his music throughout this album. But the song that I was like really like, I had expected this from the jump. Like I thought that this was going to be like the whole album was going to be like songs like this, is the song Floor 555,
Yeah.
where he's basically just like going nuts and just like screaming for like a whole minute. And I was kind of surprised that there weren't too many moments like that on the album. I actually expected the whole album to kind of be like that, because I just kind of, that's what I thought like when I saw him like on interviews and stuff like that. So I was kind of surprised that that wasn't the whole album. And I'm kind of glad, because like, I don't know if I could listen to a song like that for like 3 minutes, So
Oh no, I wouldn't have suggested that. I couldn't listen to that, so I know you would.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying, like, so that song is like maybe like a minute long, which is like, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it still allows him to kind of be who he is. But like, that's not like a version of him that I could like sit for like a whole album for. And there's a couple other songs that are like that. I'm trying to remember the other one that was kind of like that. I'll probably get to it at some point. Oh, Schizophrenia. Like that song to me, I don't know. Did you ever listen to Speeding Bullet to Heaven by Kid Cudi?
No, I don't think so.
So that's basically just like an album of Kid Cudi just trying to be like a rock star, like guitars, regular drums, like, just like, screaming and yelling. And that was one of the songs, like Schizophrenia. I was like, this sounds like it would be off of Speeding Bullet to Heaven from Kid Cudi. Like it's a very like similar comparison. And that song came like at the end of the track list. So like, I was like, was that even really necessary? Like, it's just another minute of him screaming. Like there's no point to that. So anyway, so I mean, for me personally, like just to kind of like sum it up, there's other tracks I could go into that I liked a lot. Like I really liked the song Pain Equals Best Friend. I thought that was a good track too. And then Infinity 888. Like I thought that was really cool, because like Joey Badass has a good feature, and I love Joey Badass. But I also feel like that was a song where like X did his best rapping on it. Like I think he had a really good rap flow on that song. He kind of complimented Joey really well, and I just wish that song had like a better ending, because the ending kind of just like keeps repeating that same like, not feeling the pain no more kind of like refrain. So like I wish it kind of ended a little bit better. But all in all, I thought this album, like I was surprised by it a lot. Like I was surprised by a lot of like the ideas that he had on it. I just kind of wish that he kind of explored some of those ideas a little bit further. Like some of the songs kind of finish pretty shortly. And I feel like they're kind of like half baked in a way. But like, I really wish that like he was still alive to kind of like venture off on this kind of like style and sound. Because I feel like he had something there. It just may not have been as executed as perfectly as like it could have been. But I think that if you want an album to kind of introduce you to him, like that one was a good one to listen to, because it's got great ideas. It's not long, like it doesn't like kill you with time. So yeah, I was kind of surprised by it. I don't know if I would say it's like one of my favorites, or anything like that, but like I definitely like respected a lot of the ideas that he had. And there are definitely some tracks that I would go back to and kind of revisit. I would like to listen to more of his words a little bit more, because I know he's very like deep. So I like to kind of adventure more to that. So I'll definitely listen to this again. And yeah, I thought it was pretty decent. Not bad.
Nice. Yeah. So thanks. So one thing I just wanted to say about that, and you've touched on it, is that I know he had a lot of personal issues going on, legal and stuff. I won't get into that. I'm just talking about the music. I wish it sucks that he was passed, because I think he had such a bright future ahead of him, where you could kind of, like you said, you could see he's on the cusp, or you could see he has these ideas, and he has it, and you could recognize it, but he just, obviously his life was cut short and he couldn't keep going and evolving as an artist, because I think he would have been, if not wildly successful, wildly creative and good. So I think it kind of sucks, but I'm happy you enjoyed it, and just something different, because it's something like when I listen to it, that's not the style of music I listen to, and I was just like, you know what, I'll give him a try, and I ended up really liking it at the time. So it's like, hey, I know he hasn't listened to this.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was definitely, like I said, like I was surprised. I kind of thought it was gonna be more like, he's trying to be like a punk rock, and just like almost like a what was Playboi Carti's last album?
Whole Lot of Red.
Whole Lot of Red. Like I was expecting it to kind of be like that, but like even more like left field and strange. But like I said, the first like few tracks, like maybe like the first like 5 or 6, I think, before that Floor 555 song, like I was like, oh, this is like, I wasn't expecting this kind of sound from him, and I wasn't expecting it to be like this kind of like emo rap. Like I thought it was going to be more like aggressive and like angry and mad, but it was actually more just like sad and like heartfelt in a way. So that's kind of like what surprised me about it, and I think that kind of surprise was like so surprising that it makes me want to like kind of venture more into it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so the next part of the end of the show is, now it's Kyle's turn to give me an album. So
all right, well, I had one in mind, but then you kind of said something, so now I have to kind of pull something out of my back pocket. I was gonna actually give you Stormzy, Heavy as the Head.
I've listened to that.
Yeah, so I once you said that, I was like, oh nope, gotta change it. So I think what I'm gonna have you listen to, and you can tell me if you listen to this too, but I think I'm gonna have you listen to Run the Jewels 2 by Run the Jewels.
I've only listened to what was the most recent one? That's only one I've listened to, 4.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I've only listened to 4. So and it was only once, so I don't know too much about them. I'm excited because I did like 4, and I've heard 2 is 2 their best.
I would say 2 is their best. It's a tie for me between 2 and 1.
2 and 1, okay.
I think 2 and 1 are the best. I think 2 might just beat out 1 a little bit, just because it's got a little bit more like excitement to me.
Okay.
And but yeah, they're both just crazy. Killer Mike and LP, they're just really great.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate LP's production, but he's also like, he's got some bars, he can spit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. From what I listened to, I was like pleasantly surprised by him. I didn't even know. I thought it was like more of an Eric B. Rakim. I thought it was LP was the producer. Well, then I was like, what the? So obviously I know Killer Mike, but I'm excited because I've only listened to, like I said, the most recent one, and only once. So, and I liked it. So I'm excited to listen to that one.
Yeah.
Right,
definitely.
so yeah. So next week's album for me to review is Run the Jewels 2 by Run the Jewels. So next week's topic, we're going to leave you guys in a cliffhanger. We're going to slowly drop hints throughout the week on our social media about what our topics are. So we'll keep, check our social media, and we'll keep you posted on those topics. So yeah, to wrap up, remember to follow us on Twitter at We Debate Hip Hop. Follow us on Instagram at The Hip Hop Debate. Available on all podcast platforms. So please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. The video version of every episode is available on YouTube. And remember to please subscribe. And that is it for the Hip Hop Debate episode 3. Thank you everyone for listening or watching. We hope you enjoyed, and leave us, in the comments what you thought of the episode, what your best decade is to you. And we'll see you next week. Deuces. Peace.